died of an apparent stroke.
I think there has been an urgent need for some time for us to look again at the death of Mr. Pasechnik, because what happened to him was perhaps a forerunner of what would happen to Kelly.
Author Gordon Thomas joins the skeptics who refuse to accept that Pasechnik had died of natural causes. Cohen went back to Private Eye Dresch. Though ailing, he was able to expand the investigation into the bioweapons underworld.
Well, you think about tying things back to David Kelly. Certainly South Africa is a major part.
During the 1980s, apartheid South Africa had started up a top-secret germ warfare program called Project Coast. Headed by Wouter Basson, later dubbed Dr. Death by the media, one of its goals was to develop germ weapons for use against its black population. Officially, the white regime was shunned by the world community. But in London, it emerged that British MP Norman Baker was on the same trail as Dresch. He had uncovered evidence of unofficial links between David Kelly and Project Coast.
There were connections between the British government and the apartheid regime in South Africa, and there's an open question as to how much the British government at the time, the Thatcher government, knew about Project Coast, whether they were receiving any information that was derived from Project Coast, and whether in fact they were even supporting it surreptitiously. It was clear that there was some involvement going back some time between David Kelly and Wouter Basson.
The British military lab Porton Down was clearly an important bioweapons crossroads in a world of shared secrets. What was the South African connection? And was there any link with the US anthrax attacks? The white supremacist era may be history in the new South Africa, yet its brutal legacy remains. At the height of apartheid, the fight for freedom turned the townships of South Africa into battlegrounds. The white regime began using germ warfare against select targets within the black population. Exactly what was David Kelly's connection to this dark chapter? Did a link exist to the US anthrax attacks? Perhaps Wouter Basson would know.
Good afternoon. This is Bob Cohen calling for Dr. Basson, please.
Busy with the patient. Can you phone me back?
Basson, now a practicing cardiologist, was apparently unscathed by his past. He had not spoken publicly in 5 years.
I now declare that the hearing of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is now in session.
Project Coast came to light in 1996 at the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was set up to allow victims of apartheid to testify. The commission granted amnesty to former security agents who admitted to their roles in acts of violence. Project Coast scientists testified they were developing everything from assassination tools to methods of sterilizing the black population. But Wouter Basson would admit to nothing.
Through the research reports that became available to the investigators of the Truth Commission were reports that were clearly focused on trying to find toxins that could be administered to individuals and then lead to death, but that would be undetectable post-mortem. So really it was about killing people and not being able to be found out. Designing assassination weapons, you know, classic spy stuff, umbrellas, poison-tipped umbrellas that could shoot out polycarbonate balls that would then release a poison into somebody's bloodstream and be undetectable post-mortem.
In 1999, Basson was brought to trial for murder, fraud, and drug smuggling. Witnesses described the horrors committed by Project Coast. Investigators revealed how the program had used private front companies, offshore bank accounts, and worldwide intelligence connections. It had employed 200 scientists and supplied agents like anthrax and cholera to the South African military and police. 30 months after his trial began, the judge ruled that the prosecution had failed to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Basson was found not guilty of all charges. According to investigator Chandra Gould, Project Coast reached far beyond Basson and his fellow South Africans.
What came out in the trial was that he also seemed to be connected with a far more shady, underground, international chemical and biological weapons smuggling network.
The U.S. Naval Academy's Helen Perkett has spent years investigating Project Coast.
From the beginning, this idea of can we find a way to control the size of the black population was considered one of the most important areas of research. It got even more important over time as the size of the black population and the seriousness of the uprisings increased. So that's one reason why they got into genetic modification, research into is there a way to have contraceptives that could somehow basically sterilize blacks without them knowing it, and kind of all kinds of what at the time, or in hindsight, seemed like pretty far out research.
Wouter Basson was used to being demonized. But given the chance, would he confirm his claim that Project Coast had received support from the West?
Good evening, Dr. Basson. This is Bob Cohen. Hi, just following up. I hope you received my email.
Well, we have tomorrow and Friday and Saturday.
Did you know David Kelly? Do you have a relationship with him?
I met Mr. Kelly on 3 or 4 occasions, from a pure information exchange point of view.
Did you ever meet him in Port now?
That I can't answer, but we did meet him on a few occasions.
You were able to visit Portendale, Fort Detrick?
Yes, we did that.
What have you could talk about?
No, I wouldn't like to, because I mean, the next question that I get asked is who arranged it and why and what and where, and then, I already have hassles with the UK and the American governments. I don't need any more, thank you. It's enough for me.
Basson was confirming visits to the main bioweapons labs in the West. But how far had these interactions gone? And what about the pursuit of a vaccine to render women infertile? During Basson's trial, this vaccine was characterized by many as an ethnic weapon to be used against blacks.
What happened is we had the objective to synthesize a certain protein that was in sperm for contraceptive purposes. The objective was that if you could immunize a woman against sperm, then you would make her infertile. We were asked to do this by another country who had a population explosion problem as part of an exchange of technology. They were giving us other stuff. They asked about, we haven't got the time or the place to do that. Will you guys do that?
Basson and his team never perfected the vaccine. He denies it was ever intended as an ethnic weapon.